So it's official. I've turned into my mother. I can hear myself using some of the same expressions that she used when I was growing up. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I learned lots of great life lessons from my mother as a child. In fact, I grew up as an Army brat, so we moved every 2 to 3 years, and my dad was frequently away, which meant that my mom was the stability. She was the one that had the big influence on who we would become, and in particular on our communication skills. In fact, I don't think there was anyone that had the impact on my communication as much as my mom. I have a feeling you all probably heard some of the same phrases that my mom used. So complete the phrase if they sound familiar. For example, if it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
Sticks and stones will break my bones. And my personal favorite, if you can't say something nice,
don't say it at all.
Isn't that interesting? We've all heard these phrases. And that last one was really big in my family. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I remember there were times when we might make an inappropriate comment or maybe get ready to go down a dark communication detour, and my mother would immediately cut us off, change the subject. And her favorite random phrase to do that was, nice day if it doesn't rain. That was like the ultimate redirect. So, you know, it's interesting because we have these challenges as women, especially where we're redirected, told don't say it if it's not nice. And so that's quite the challenge. But you and I know in the grown-up world of work and relationships, sometimes we just have to say what we need to say. And you know, my special challenge is that I'm the oldest of 4 children, which makes me the bossy big sister by nature. So my dilemma, when I first started as a working person years ago, and especially as a supervisor, my challenge was, how do I boss people around without being bossy? Or better yet, how do I boss people around without them knowing that I'm bossy? So that was my big dilemma. And it occurred to me that I could make one small adjustment in my choice of words that would make a huge difference. It occurred to me that I could get rid of the bossy, demanding style and replace it with a request instead. So, for example, instead of saying the bossy, you better, you need to, you will, I could instead say, I need you to, I would appreciate, I prefer. Or if I had to use the bossy you word, I could soften it in a question. Would you be willing to? Would you consider? And that would make a huge difference in being able to get what I wanted. You know, recently I was watching a movie called How Do You Know, starring one of my favorite actresses, Reese Witherspoon. Some of you may have seen the movie. And in the movie, she's a bit distraught at one point after some setbacks. So she decides to go to a therapist. And after about 2 minutes, she jumps up and she says, you know, this therapy thing is not for me. But as she's leaving, as she's on her way out the door, she stops and she asks the therapist, can you at least just give me one piece of general multi-purpose advice? That you would just give anyone. So the therapist stops for a moment and he ponders, he thinks about it, and he says, okay, here it is. Figure out what you want, and then learn how to ask for it. And then later in the movie, she gets some advice from a friend, and the friend declares the following. Most of us are just one small adjustment away from making our lives work. And I thought, isn't that interesting? One small adjustment is probably something that as women we could consider. One small adjustment that we might make, whether that be learning to ask for what we want, or maybe learning to change the bossy you to the request for I. That's a tough challenge. Now, this isn't rocket science. Although I hear there have been rocket scientists on the TEDx stage. But this will make a big difference in our lives if we can learn to ask more effectively for what we want. Because as women, after all, we've been told, if it meets with disapproval or it's unpopular, maybe we shouldn't say it or do it. We've been told if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And we've also been told, nice day if it don't rain. So anyway, back to my mother. I was standing in her home office, and it was even odd that she had a home office, because growing up, she was a stay-at-home mom. But she had a home office, and it was filled with colorful paintings, projects that were pending, jewelry and baubles of all kind, shelves of books. And I was standing in this office 7 years ago, because she had just passed away. And being the oldest of 4 children, it was my job to decide which things we would keep and which things we would give away. And as I looked around her office, I noticed there were books on how to sell your jewelry on eBay, how to auction off your paintings, and all kinds of callings that would never be answered. You know what also struck me? Was that this was not really just an ending. It was also a beginning. In fact, it was really the space between what my mother had done and what I would do going forward. I went straight home, and I tell you I went straight home because I had been pouting the whole year up to this moment. I had been pouting because I had sent off a book proposal to big publishers in New York, and they had rejected me. So my proposal was sitting there on the shelf collecting dust. And in that moment, I went and pulled the proposal off the shelf and started writing. But then I made one small adjustment. Instead of pursuing these big publishers, I published the book myself with the help of a small independent publisher. And in the front of the book, there's a dedication that says, "This book is dedicated to my late mother, Doris Maybin, from whom I learned the love of the spoken and written word." Wouldn't that have been nice if she had had a chance to say what she needs to say? I think the world would have really benefited from what she could have shared. So I'm wondering, what goals do you need to pursue? What small adjustment can you make? What do you need to say that's not been said? It reminds me of the John Mayer song. Some of you may know the song. And he says, even as your hands are shaking, even as your faith is broken, do it with a heart wide open. Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say. Thank you.